Hello everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Jupy, a long-time Dead by Daylight player, Prestige 100 Xenomorph, and Prestige 100 Springtrap main. Now, normally I'd be starting these videos on a more positive note, but I just had a video, almost finished creation, about tunneling last night, and then they dropped these patch notes to completely make my video useless. So, back to the drawing board, I guess. Anyway, yesterday, for me, Australian time, shut up, DBD released the patch notes for the 9.2.0 PTB, in which we'll be getting our new TIE Killer and Survivor, which we don't know much more about at this moment. So the dev notes are mostly serving to give us some new information regarding anti-tunneling, anti-slugging changes that will come with this update, and oh boy, do I have some choice words for these changes.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit, but I do think that there's a bunch of changes that will need to be made before this hits live. Oh, but Jupy, you gotta wait till you tested the PTB. Yes, I get that. I'm merely showing my initial thoughts to this system that they're proposing. I will analyze it more in depth on the PTB, of course. First, let's start off with the anti-slugging changes. If a survivor is on the ground for 90 seconds during a game, they gain the ability to pick themselves up. Wow, it's exactly the change I proposed a month ago.
In an ideal world, I'd suggest 1.5 minutes of being on the ground would allow you to pick yourself up without charging up a meter.
But the wording of this is somewhat confusing. They say 90 seconds during a game. Do they mean it's cumulative, or it's per instance of being down? For example, if someone's been on the ground for 80 seconds earlier in the game and they get down again in the end game, do they only need to be on the ground for 10 seconds to pick up? I presume this isn't the case, but behavior's wording in their dev notes is usually poorly done to begin with. So while I was editing this, I got sent this basically part of the forums that basically was elaborating on the anti-slugging mechanic. And so what this effect, it is cumulative 90 seconds. So what this effect actually does now is that if you're in the dying state for 90 seconds, you can self-pick up, but that timer never resets, which means that if you're on the dying state again, once you reach full recovery, you can pick yourself up automatically. The small next bit is not going to be as relevant, but basically it gives you unbreakable for the rest of the trial once you've been on the ground for 90 seconds, in essence. But let's just presume they mean in an instance of you being downed, if you're on the ground for 90 seconds, you can pick yourself up. Great, that's a fantastic change. That in and of itself is a healthy mechanic, and if you disagree, you need to play the game in a method that isn't 4-man slugging ignoring hooks. Faster crawling speed is also being implemented the longer you're on the ground, which again, I'm fine with. It makes slugging less brain dead to pull off, and forces the killer to actually be aware of the position of the slug survivor, rather than just fucking off the Narnia for a minute and coming back to their room temperature survivor sitting on a plate. However, I disagree with the change to make recovering while moving base kit, largely due to the fact that conviction exists. In a convictionless world, I wouldn't mind it so much, but that perk is already so stupidly overtuned that it's going to make this feature feel very unbearable to play into. I'd suggest adding a second part to this feature, where you can start recovering while moving after 15 seconds of being slugged, to allow for conviction to not just be as much of a turn your brain off perk, but also lets you crawl to teammates to reset if they're further away. Overall though, the anti-slugging changes, I'm pretty happy with them, and they're going to make this game healthier in the long term. Now, onto the anti-tunneling changes, and there is a lot to unpack. First, hook states are now hidden from the killer, and no notification or icon changes happen when a survivor is unhooked for a limited time. Now, for the most part, this is okay. However, it does make proxying way more of an appetizing strategy, because contesting unhooks is an extremely good use of killer's pressure. Even if you don't plan to tunnel, forcing a trade is a huge momentum maker for a killer, and not knowing when an unhook occurs is going to make killers more likely to hang out in the area of the unhook to keep the strategy alive. This will also make survivors take longer for unhooks, and therefore spend more time on gens, which, yes, I know, efficiency is good, but the gameplay value of being efficient on gens while survivor was being on hook was that it was a risk. If the killer realized you were doing this and went back to defend the hook near the end of the cycle, the survivors would lose a hook state, and that's interesting gameplay. You could save someone early and get more pressure on gens again, or you could sit on gens to be more efficient in a short span and risk saving near the end. It makes for exciting and risky gameplay, but I digress. I would say that it kind of pigeonholes into killers into running information perks, but this problem gets elaborated on later. Unhooked survivors also get these effects: Endurance, Haste, and Elusive, which is basically just Lucky Break and Iron Will in one. That's fine, that's just a slight upgrade to what we already have. But, no collision with other players, thank fucking god. This is a change I'm frankly surprised took so long to implement, So many games I would have some idiot get unhooked and use their endurance to body block me and then cry that I tunneled them because I downed them while they were inhibiting my ability to get to another survivor. Immunity to killer instinct, weird, but go off I guess. Honestly, the only issue I see with this is sometimes with Legion, to reach the 4 hits with your power to get the down, you'd hit someone who is fresh off hook to just get that extra chain, but now I guess that's not possible unless you physically can see them. Which, yeah, Legion needed more nerfs. And these effects are lost when a conspicuous action is done. Honestly, in my opinion, there's only one full issue with these changes, and that's the fact that the endurance and haste has no timer in endgame. Are you serious? At minimum, make it back to 10 seconds in endgame. That should be a period where anything goes to secure final kills, but realistically, a survivor could clear the entire map to get to a gate with this, and there's fuck all the killer can do. In the main game, I don't mind it being tied to conspicuous actions because of the next section, but it being unlimited in endgame is frankly absurd. Now the devs don't want it to be just don't tunnel cause lol. They're adding incentives to killers to make them not want to tunnel as well. First of all, you can always tell the last survivor you hooked on your HUD, so you know who to avoid, which segues into your rewards for hooking unique survivors. If you hook someone who wasn't the last survivor hooked, you get bonus gen damage, temporary haste, and mini barbecue on survivors with equal or less hook states. This is a good idea in practice, but I can't speak much on it until we see numbers. But mini barbecue is extremely good to be able to incentivize not proxying and to find your next chases easier. It also stops specific survivors from being that useless bot who hides in the bush the whole game and then complains that you tunneled because you didn't find them. Otherwise, we really need to see numbers to see how these will go. But these numbers will need to be similar to or greater than the effects you get from tunneling to actually make them worth it. These effects are also lessons for Blight, Ghoul, Brack, Billy, and Nurse due to their high mobility. Honestly, I like the idea of imposing base kit mechanics to buff the little guys while toning these effects down on higher tier killers. So this is honestly a good change. Lord knows B tier and below killers need some buffs. The next section is where my problems come from, however. Everything above this has been largely good and healthy for the game, but the fundamental flaws are in the fact that if a survivor dies before 6 total hook states, survivors gain faster gen progress for the rest of the trial, and a survivor who had the last hooked icon on the HUD is sacrificed or killed, all generators are unkickable, unregressible, and unblockable for the rest of the trial. I'm sorry, what? 6? There are so many games where you aren't tunneling, but you go for 2 people exclusively, and that strategy is gone. So if you go like, for example, Leon, Ada, Leon, Ada, Leon, you're gonna get punished because you end up killing someone at 5 hooks. So even though you're not tunneling, you still get punished. This number honestly just needs to be 4 at max. That's the only instance where it's obvious you're tunneling. Because 6 hooks is really easy to fuck up and force by survivors in order to give a huge advantage. This alone is a massive advantage to survivors. And completely guts killers like Sadako and Pig, who honestly who use their powers to kill people. And usually, if a survivor plays poorly, you will get a kill early, and that's how they get their power, because they suck otherwise. But the nail in the coffin is that if you kill or sacrifice someone who was last hooked, you can't get gens anymore. That's fucked. This is basically going to incentivize survivors forcing this to happen by sacrificing a teammate, and especially in Swips, they can engineer this to basically make a situation where the killer would have a more fun time abandoning than playing out the game. Honestly, delete this entire tag if you're keeping the number at 6 hook states. Completely removing 50% of a killer's ability to stop generators is stupid, and I cannot imagine how behaviors design ideas if this is what was chosen. What behavior is basically saying is that if someone is stupid against Sadako or Pig, gets themselves condemned early by playing Sadako well, Sadako gets punished? That makes fucking no sense. Honestly, 90% of the changes that they're proposing I'm fine with the exception of these last 2, just because of how badly this punishes killers that play the game efficiently. Obviously hard tunneling is lame, that's why I'm suggesting 4 hook states to cause the gen efficiency. Killing someone around 6 hook states is pretty much a natural occurrence in Dead by Daylight, and the fact that killers now get punished for doing so is ridiculous. Onto something more controversial somehow, the Myers rework got announced. Daddy, yes! Now I'm not gonna lie, I find Myers boring as fuck to play. So the prospect of a rework is great, as he's a favorite horror icon of mine. And honestly, this rework seems super fun. Yeah, I know. I've seen people go, oh great, more dash slot, but I've got something to say to that. Killers with mobility are the most fun ones and have the highest pick rate. It's simple supply and demand. It's why Wesker, Carnegie, and Blight have such high pick rates. It's fun. Why would they not lean into it? It sells copies. But Maya's being a stealthy stance change killer with an insta-down dash that breaks pallets is cool and very in character. He's meant to be this unstoppable force of pure evil, not someone who gets stopped by a fucking piece of wood. When the patch notes drop for this PTB, I'll elaborate more on and test these changes, but honestly it seems like they'll make him actually fun to play for once. And for the people mourning the loss of Scratched Mirror Myers, that playstyle is boring as fuck past the first game. It quite literally boils down to survivors camp pallets and hold W, and in endgame you slug all four with no ed. It's a snooze fest. Only real tension point I can actually see with these changes, however, is that Myers can now do his usual tombstone mori on survivors on death hook. I can kind of see scenarios where Myers will face camp, once anti-camp fills up, he'll just grab them off hook and mori them, which won't really be fun to face. However, overall I'm excited for this rework. Other smaller changes were introduced to some killers, but honestly they're nothing to write home about. Clown nerfs to his piss bottle activation speed, so now he's going to be shitter than before the Walking Dead update. Great job behavior, nerfed another C tier killer. I do agree that the activation needed to be fucked around with, because it was stupid, however I guarantee it's going to suck. They've made Unknown's aiming more vertically flexible, which is great. I see no reason Springtrap can aim straight up, but Unknown can't. Dracula got some buffs to Vampire and nerfs to Wolf, which is good, because Wolf was literally just a better Demogorgon. I don't know how that's just like a sub-power. And Oni got some pathetic attempts at trying to make him not shit after these slugging changes by giving extra blood orbs when you hook someone. Overall though, this patch seems pretty promising. However, the key tension points I touched on, including the punishment for hooking the same survivor and the killing someone before 6 hooks, definitely needs to be looked at in the PTB, because I feel those will damage the game if they go past the PTB. Thanks for watching. I've been working on a really long-form video about Dead by Daylight as a whole that I'll attempt to release in September. It's taking a long time to make, so I hope you all like it. But don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and turn on notifications as I'll be heavily covering the PTB for this new chapter within the next few days. Peace!